Well said, Holly.
Thank you. So good morning, everybody. I'd like to call this meeting to order. It is now 9 on the dot. Stephanie, will you please take attendance?
Of course, good morning, everyone. Adrian will not be joining us today. Andrea Comer.
Present.
Ella McKitterick.
Present.
John Scott. Doesn't look like he's joined us yet. Mike Schultes.
Present.
And Holly Williams.
Present.
All right, we have a quorum.
Thank you. And I'd like to thank any members of the public for joining us this morning. We're going to start with a review of the August 25th, 2023 minutes. And so I'd like to ask for a call to approve.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Thank you. And a second.
I don't know if I can second. I think I was absent for that meeting.
You can still second. You just
Okay.
would abstain for the vote.
Okay, second.
Thanks.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Any opposed? Any abstentions?
That would be me.
And that would be me.
Thank you. So noted 2 abstentions. So the motion carries. Thank you. We'll move on to a budget review of spending to date. Dave, can you please provide an update?
Yes, thank you, Holly. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us this morning. We are going to discuss the results for the month of August. And everyone can see my screen?
Not yet.
Not yet. Okay.
You can see your screen now.
Okay, thank you. Let me know if there's a slight delay on anything. I think there's a slight delay on my side. But good morning, everybody, again. Okay, so for the month of August, our operating expenses for the month were $1.1 million. That was our income less expenses was about $40,000 better than that because we had $40,000 of fund recovery penalties for the month, which is higher than what we budgeted. So we've had a decent couple of months so far with our fund recovery efforts. We'll see more of that a little later. But as far as the operating expenses go, they were $364,000 better than budget for the month. So primarily the expenses that make up the $1,146,000 were payroll and related expenses. Those were $581,000. Our contact center expense for the month, which was the usual $128,000. We paid our quarterly grievance adjudication expense to the Department of Labor for the appeals work that they do on our behalf, and that was $114,000. That was less than what we expected for the quarter, so there was a positive variance that way. IT licenses were $91,000 for the month. That was higher than what we expected, but that's a timing difference because we paid our annual fund recovery license in the month, and that happened in a different month than what we expected. But by the end of the year, that will all even out. We also had a timing difference for DAS services. We paid our annual fee to them for the HR and IT functionality that they provide us. We also had some consulting for some IT work. That was $53,000. Our actuarial expense was $47,000. That was for the annual report that you all saw previously. And our outreach expense was $31,000. So that what makes up the expenses for the month. Year to date, which is 2 months so far, we've spent about $1.9 million and we're ahead of budget by $734,000. Moving on to our bond money, was a light month for bond spending, about $27,000. Finishing up some spending on fund recovery and some other things. We're still $121,000 ahead of budget for the year so far. We do expect that variance to decrease as we wrap up the spending for the website redesign and replatforming, and finish up the spending on the fund recovery system and get that spending finalized. In terms of how much money we do have left in bond funds, we have over $2.7 million remaining. So we spent almost $13.3 million so far out of the $16 million that's allocated. We are contemplating requesting some additional bond funds by the end of this calendar year in December. We're still in the early stages of that, so more details to follow as they come. In terms of contribution activity for the month, our activity was a negative $32.8 million. That was not as good as we had budgeted, as $3.4 million. The primary driver of that was we had 5 weeks of benefits that we paid as opposed to 4 weeks. And our benefits budget was more or less evened out for the year, with a slight increase every month. So that explains the variance. We are still slightly ahead of budget year to date by $278,000. And we're not expecting a long-term trend of paying out more bonds than we budgeted. Moving on to other items in the contribution account, our contribution revenue was over $2 million for the month, about $176,000 lower than budgeted. Our fund recovery revenue was $132,000. That was made up of actual fund recovery contributions we got and some interest. And almost all of that was better than what we had anticipated for the budget. So we were $131,000 ahead. So that offset the negative contribution revenue variance. And our investment income of over $2.5 million was better than budget by over $587,000. And the driver of that is a higher rate than what we budgeted for. We are earning about 5.25% now in our short-term investment fund. So year to date, our activity is $50.6 million, and we're better than budget overall by $11 million. So that positive trend variance continues. The contribution account has $549 million in it as of the end of August. Again, primary drivers of that, the contribution revenue, over $1 billion of that so far. And our benefits claims that have been paid so far since inception are $462 million. Just a quick look at the balance sheet. Total assets are over $565 million. And as usual, the short-term investment fund is the largest driver of that, $536 million. No projections this month because it's still early in the fiscal year and we don't have any meaningful variances that would be different than budget at this time. So that's where we are for the month of August. Does anybody have any questions?
Don't see any. All right, so it's still you, Dave. We're going to go through the audited financials, or at least receive an update on the audit.
Yes, we're going to have an update. So
Yeah.
The original plan was to have the auditors here for this meeting, but that will happen next month. And the reason for that is we have some new accounting pronouncements coming from GAAP this year. Actually, it's GASB 96. And so what's new this year is there's new pronouncements for, make sure I get this right, subscription-based information technology arrangements. The abbreviation is known as SPITA. So what are those? So we subscribe to various software items. And the new GAAP requires that if it meets certain criteria, that they have to be put on the balance sheet. So the liability has to be put on the balance sheet for those subscription arrangements that are of a certain type and a certain time period and things like that. And so since you have a right to use those technology arrangements, the offset to that is on the balance sheet in terms of a right to use asset account. This is part of the accounting industry's move to continue to put things on the balance sheet and show as much in the liabilities as they can. The P&L effect of this isn't much. It's not material. What happens is instead of seeing an expense on the IT line, the expense would be moved to depreciation expense because now it's an asset, and there'd also be some interest expense because when you're figuring out the liability, there comes into a present value calculation, and since you have to present value it, there's interest. So I also think it so as you might anticipate, there, depending how many subscriptions you have, the calculations could be quite involved. So we worked with our auditors, determined which ones were applicable. Since it was new GAAP this year, it took a bit of time. It was the first year we were doing it, and the first year the auditors were doing it, and we're one of their first clients to have it in there, partly because we have a June 30 fiscal year. So we needed an extra couple of weeks just to make sure we were recording everything correctly, which to date we've been told we have. So they will go over the audited financials in October. I will say that so to date, the auditors have signed off on our numbers. Next week will be their partner reviews. They'll get back to us with any comments they have at that time. But to date, they haven't indicated that there are any adjusting entries or any reportable findings. As Yogi Berra once said, it's not over till it's over. So they haven't officially signed off on anything, but that's the information we've received preliminarily so far. So as in prior years, once we get the audited financials, we'll send them to you in advance, so you have time to look over them, read them, and ask the auditors any questions when they present about a month from now. Does anybody have any questions on the audit?
Don't see any. Thank you, Dave. We appreciate the update. Is there any old business this morning?
Mm-mm.
Any new business?
Mm-mm.
All right, we were pretty expeditious this morning. It's always good on a Friday. So may I have a motion to adjourn?
Move to adjourn.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, the motion carries. Have a lovely weekend, everybody.
All right.
Have a
Take
good night.
care.
everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.